So welcome to the show. Um, it's great to
Thanks.
have you here. And as we're recording, just before we started, we're both acknowledging that while we're recording this, we're still in the aftermath of one of the most destructive fires in LA's history. And at the same time, it's weird that we have to also continue to move forward and do these kind of things that feel weird.
Yeah.
That it's like I feel a little schizophrenic myself. But hey, we have some good positive stuff to share, and your next adventure and your book is full of health giving choices for people. So hey, let's celebrate what we can,
Yeah.
and provide health for people, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I've had a lot of conversations this week where people feel really helpless and are like, I don't know how you're doing this, how you're doing this book tour, how you're doing all these things. And I think it was kind of an aha moment for me where it's like, we can sit back and feel helpless where a lot of these events make us feel that way, especially what's going on too politically right now and all the things that are happening. But I think a way to get out of that anxiety spiral is to just do something, to have something to contribute or to volunteer or to adjust what you do professionally in a way that can contribute to be part of the help. So, this book is very much that for me. It's very political. It's also very, food driven and about agriculture and global warming and our health and all that stuff. So I'm just like lasered in, I'm focused. I'm like, okay, this is my little gift to the world. And hopefully we can continue to grow and expand and, yeah, be a part of the positive change that we want to see.
Yeah, there's so many different layers, and I'm happy to dive into any one of those,
Yeah.
because some of these things get thrown into categories, and I don't know if they necessarily fit all that well based on the change of how people are viewing certain terminologies, right? So
Hmm.
even whether you call it plant-based, whether you call it vegan, whether you call it climate change, whether you call it whatever these things, I think there's the nuances and the fine print underneath all of that stuff that
Yeah.
sometimes gets lost. It sometimes gets buried because unfortunately people wield these political ideologies that that also lose some of the nuance,
Right.
that I think is necessary. And I always try to navigate those waters as best I can so that we can bring more people on the common sense understanding of things. Because whether people are listening and they're plant-based or not plant-based, there's certain things that they can take away
Yeah.
that are less disputed about the overall.
Yeah.
So yeah, talk to me about some of that stuff. The
Yeah,
the
totally. I think it's so interesting what you just said too. Like there's a little bit of a culture war happening in wellness right now, which I think nuance is definitely appreciated. And with that, I do think that veganism and plant-based kind of needs a little bit of a rebrand. I think I think everyone's used to the angry vegans, and I think a lot of times people are afraid to even jump into the lifestyle because they're afraid of being perfect, or they're afraid of getting torn apart online, or they're also just, there's so much different information coming at them from 20 different levels on social media specifically where they don't really know where to go forward. And I think this book specifically is kind of a foot in the door. It's not necessarily a book about going vegan. It's called Breaking Up with Dairy, and it really focuses on the dairy industry specifically. And the dairy industry is a super destructive industry in so many different ways, the way that it treats the animals, how it is for our health, our gut health, our risk of cancer, heart disease, all of that stuff. And, the environmental aspect, how much water the dairy industry uses, all that kind of stuff. So it's this big, big, big industry that has a lot of pull when it comes to the government and lobbying. And, it's like big tobacco, it's got a lot of
Right.
power. So there's a reason why dairy is being advertised in schools, and there's a reason why, kids are the most allergic to dairy than they are to anything else. So yeah, it's a big topic. There's a lot that we could go into. So yeah, where do you want to start?
Well, well, there's so many layers, and obviously, I think it's roughly around 75% of the people are intolerant or have some sort of adverse reaction to dairy, and most
Yeah.
people don't even know. And then you could peel that back even further. Is that a lactose intolerance? Yes, some. Is that a poor quality vis-a-vis through hormones and pesticides and the wrong food for those animals anyway? The growth hormone that's
Hmm.
injected, it's a chemicalized version of maybe at one point because they didn't have anything else they chose to drink milk back in the day. I'm not arguing that we grew up in that. When I say we grew up, I'm saying like the cultural, the use of fermentation, the use of utilizing a resource from animals
Right.
that was there. I mean, just because historically we did it doesn't make it the best choice.
Right.
And then you cut to all of what the modern day world has created it into. And now it's a completely different conversation
Mhm.
because your audience, my audience, most of the people, 99% plus of those people, of the normal person, is not spending the extra money getting and going through the hoops of trying to get non-pasteurized dairy, raw
Mhm.
milk, for example, raw whatever. So you're dealing with this passing on of, is dairy good or bad? The point is it's polluted. The point is it's full of chemicals. The point is it's full of all these other things. So the nuance is it's not a great scenario. It's not a great food now.
Mhm.
So I'm not even saying like stepping out of the plant-based thing, just looking at it from the pollution side of it,
Yes.
the pollution of said dairy, if you're consuming it, or meat, all of that stuff, it's not the same and it's
Well,
been
and
changed.
the sheer demand, when we have, so many people, millions and millions, billions of people who are demanding dairy, on average, an American eats 52 to 56 pounds of cheese per year. So that's a lot of cheese. And that's not even considering all the milk, coffee creamer, all that stuff as well. So when you're looking at the sheer volume of dairy, the only way to actually produce this much dairy is by factory farming. It's the only way to make it happen. And these cows can have like 16 babies in their lifetime in order to produce this much milk. And so it's really just like this machine that's using and abusing these animals that are in these horrible conditions. And just what you just talked about, have so many pharmaceuticals. 60% of all the pharmaceuticals used in the US go straight towards animals that we use in factory farms. And 99% of all the meat products that we get come from factory farms. So we have this idea when we look at the dairy box or the carton or whatever, that it's this happy cow and this pasture, but that's not what it is. And I think a lot of us want to think that that's where we're getting our food from because that's ideally what it would be, but there's literally no way. There's literally no way that we could create that type of environment for that many cows to feed billions of people as much dairy as they're consuming.
Yeah, which is it then becomes a really big, not only polluting on an individual level, but a polluting on a global level.
Right.
And so that's where, when we get into these boxes of, fighting against some carnivore person or a plant-based,
Hmm.
it loses all of those nuances.
Yeah.
And it becomes dogmatic and right and wrong and all of those things. And that's where it's a bummer
Yeah.
because it's like I don't know about you, but I've just never I was never really interested in trying to convert people
Mm.
or I'll give them information and it's really none of my business, right?
Yeah.
If you want to shut off awareness and consume something that, again, take off the plant-based or whatever, if you just want to shut off awareness that you want to consume something that's going to increase your antibiotic resistance, it's going to potentially infuse you full of pesticides and herbicides and GMOs and glyphosate and all of these things, leading to just a plethora of
Hmm.
long-term effect. What are we supposed to do? Like
Right.
that, then you can give the information. Some will, some won't, some do, some don't. And then you just got to keep moving.
Yeah.
You just got to put out this information and celebrate food, right? Celebrate what we
Hmm.
can do and so listen, I applaud you for diving into these aspects because it's necessary. It's just necessary and it's not comfortable.
No.
It's not comfortable.
It's not.
It's not comfortable knowing the truth,
No,
you
it's the
know?
worst. Yeah. I talk about the 5 stages of breaking up in the book because it's kind of written like a breakup blueprint. Like Derry is your toxic ex-boyfriend that you just can't get away from in our modern society. And denial is the first step because
Yeah.
denial is so comfortable. Like we want to stay in denial forever. And I think that's why we love, wellness influencers who come on and talk about how we can drink as much dairy as we want to. We can live off of cheese and go into ketosis because that is just a way of being in denial of the truth. And I think there's this polarity of where wellness I do wellness in air quotes, where wellness is going, where wellness has become so obsessed with the self that we've totally lost the plot. I think we can't really have wellness if we're not looking at the greater impact of the world around us, if we're not looking at, the wellness of our world, the wellness of the animals, the wellness of so many different things. So when we're buying things that contribute to these horrible corporations that are doing horrible things, that are also doing all the things that you said, pumping these animals full of all these pesticides and herbicides and pharmaceuticals, and like where's the wellness in that? I think
Mhm.
if we feel good, I want all of us to feel good, but at the end of the day, like what are the long-term effects? I feel like that is true wellness, and I really am passionate about talking about getting us back to wellness being a part of like the community versus just so focused on the self.
Yeah, because even if, listen, I'm not in a delusion that everyone's going to switch over and just quit everything right
No,
now, right?
definitely not. Yeah.
But if they take away, if people who want to stick with, animal-based eating, um, could just open up some awareness
Hmm.
around their food quality, and the reality, and if their pocketbook, they can, you know, rent a cow and get directly from the nipple of that cow their milk, because that's really the only way you're going to be able to do it in the United States because it's illegal
Hmm.
not to, okay, then spend the money, spend the resources and do that. But at least be aware of the situation. Like
Right.
and that's where, I agree with you. Denial is just it's such a detriment to just life, right?
Hmm.
It's like it's the ostrich shoving its head in the sand, and we have so many people that just don't want to be bothered, and we have to acknowledge, even though, is the world worse this decade than the last decade? I don't know, but we're certainly being hit with so much information through
Yeah.
media and social media, and the algorithms are geared to our amygdala being in
Mhm.
fear and freaking out all the time. So I get it. The resiliency of people is so low,
Right.
um, because of this. But again, we have agency to change, and we have to look at this stuff. You know, just speaking of dairy a little bit, like, you look at casein, the
Mhm.
concentration of casein in cheese, with opioid, it's addictive. It's potentially research around it being nitric oxide for cancer, so it's like,
Yeah.
okay, what do you want to do here? And again, I love that you said that, because as within, so without. Like, okay, you're so focused on yourself, you don't give a shit about everything. And I understand, I'm driving a car, I'm doing a thing, no one's
Right.
perfect,
Perfect.
but at least when you open your mouth, you have a little bit of an agency,
Hmm.
there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is it's again, I go back to like toggling, right?
Hmm.
It's like, what did you find in the book in terms of like, because I know what it's like to put a book together. It's a lot of hard work,
Yeah.
especially if you're starting. This is not a normal cookbook. This is like you're opening up a world view
Yeah.
that is often lost in what we're talking about. How was that for you to kind of walk through that? And I know also what happens is if you go too far, it becomes a whole book just about animal agriculture, because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
So how did you find your balance between saying enough and then also stopping and then focusing on, you know, what you want to focus on?
That's a good question. So the book started from this TikTok series, Breaking Up the Dairy, and people were going crazy over it, tens of millions of views on all these videos. And I really realized that this was something when the Dairy Farmers Association of America picked up on it and started threatening me.
Oh,
And I was like, okay, we're getting some traction here. It's not just about views. I was getting these crazy personal stories from people who have been through the ringer with the healthcare system, or who have been trying to break up with cheese, who just can't, who have food addiction, who have diabetes. Like, the crazy people would just open up to me based off these stories of me making mac and cheese, telling stories. People just loved the series. And then when the Dairy Farmers Association of America started threatening me, and I started getting all these farmers stitching my video talking about how happy their cows are, I was like, okay, like, I'm totally ruffling some feathers here. This is how I know I'm getting somewhere. And so when I was writing the book, I was thinking about that a lot, because I realized the book has a lot of weight to it. It's also very political. I think people forget a lot how political food is. They think it's just, I'm just going to eat, I'm just going to meal prep, I'm just going to go to the grocery store. When reality, food is so political. What goes on our shelves is political. What gets advertised to us is political. Even what fast food restaurants, how much cheese that they're advertising is literally a government regulation from, the dairy industry, or from the local governments needing to sell more cheese because they subsidize it. And so this was just a very hard thing for me. I was also very depressed when I was researching this book. I was like, oh
yeah.
God, this is the most depressing industry ever, because it's not just, the government lobbying and how corrupt it all is. It's also all the animals that are suffering, but also all the people that are suffering from this. Kids are getting advertised milk in their schools. Kids are getting forced to drink milk in schools, even if they don't feel good when they drink it or whatever. It's this tangled web, is what it feels like. And it's all very much controlled by this very, very, very powerful industry, the dairy industry. There's the dairy checkoff program, there's all these regulations, there's all these things. And so when you really start pulling back the layers, I remember sitting in front of my manuscript just being like, I don't even know how to tackle this, because it's so much more than just recipes. And I will say the recipes are amazing and incredible, as I'm a classically French trained chef, so cheese was my thing for a long time. But it was like, how do I connect people with the education so that they're motivated and inspired to cook these recipes, because it's easy to pick up a cookbook and have it collect dust on your countertop, or you have your one or two recipes that you make. But I really wanted this to be a blueprint to show people that you can have your coffee creamer, you can have your cheddar cheese, you can have all the things that you love, while also educating them through the 5 stages of breaking up, educating them through all these things while still keeping it palatable. So you're right. It was like walking this line, because you don't really want to shove it down people's throats. You want to just gently be like, here's some information, digest this a little bit. Here's things you probably didn't know. I think would be surprised to know that a lot of people don't know that dairy cows actually are just mothers, they're moms. The reason why they produce dairy is because they're moms. So dairy cow's milk is just breast milk from a cow. And a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think that dairy cows just make dairy, and so they don't think about what happens to the babies, or how these cows get artificially inseminated over and over and over and over again. And I think these little pieces of education about what's actually happening in the industry, I think we can give people more credit in knowing that once they know, they will take a step back. They will be like, whoa, I had no idea that was happening, because the dairy industry is so good at falsely advertising to us. Like, that's what they're best at. They get the top celebrities, the most powerful people of influence, and they're doing it now with influencers. Like, on average, they spend like $15 million a year in social media marketing. So
Wow.
it's crazy. So it's like, all of this stuff is happening. We're all being swindled. I don't necessarily blame the consumer, which is why I think education and explaining and informing is one of the most powerful things that we can do. And just also sharing food, food is so cultural, it's so personal. It reminds us of people that we love, of times, that we miss. And I think being able to have those same foods, but just in a different way, is kind of the bridge. It's the way to get people to see that you can have it all. You can have what you want. You can have what we all need as a collective to like make change. And you don't have to give up as many things as you think you do.
Mhm. And also, like, so much of this stuff is, food is something we have to do. It
Mhm.
is culturally and family and all of these things that are so intertwined and ritualistic and dopamine producing. Just
Yeah.
the art and the act of making your coffee and then adding your creamer, and all of these kind of things are so dialed. And like you said, the industry itself it's had a runway for a long time to kind of start to and try to steer the conversation in its favor. And it kind of dumbs down what is being shared and what the truth is, and out of sight, out of mind. And so, what are your, you can say the high level or as much detail as you want. What are those 5 stages of the breakup?
5 stages of the breakup. So we have denial, which I talked about, which pretty much everyone's in.
Yeah.
And I think denial, denial protects us. Denial keeps us at a resting state. It keeps us from experiencing too much stress. It's comfortable, which is why we're all there. I was in denial for a very long time. I was eating cheese boards for years and years, and I was getting super sick and having endometriosis and having horrible health problems, and I was still eating the cheese. It was like I was in denial. It is what it is. That's where most people live. Then we have anger, which is where I think the term like the angry vegan comes from, is because once get out of denial, you start learning about things, you get angry, you get pissed, you're upset, you're like, how did I not know? How, for me, so my grandfather's a butcher. When I was first in culinary school, I was working in the butchery. I ended up going to a slaughterhouse as like kind of part of my program at Le Cordon Bleu. And I used to, before pre-slaughterhouse, I used to like go enter into competitions and how quickly I could take apart a whole pig. And then I
Oh.
went to a slaughterhouse and saw everything and then started doing research and was like, what have I been doing? I was so disconnected from the pig For me, it was just, it literally, all I saw was a piece of meat before. That's how I
Right.
was raised. I'm Polish. That's how I was brought up. And then all of a sudden something clicked, like it just changed. And I was just mortified, devastated, and more than anything, just angry. I was angry at myself. I was angry at society. I was angry at everything because I just finally the dots connected for me. And I think that's what happens a lot of times when if you really research the dairy industry. There's this video on YouTube called Dairy is Scary. It's 5 minutes long. And I watched that early on in my vegan journey. And I was so angry after I watched that video because I was so disturbed. And, then I became the angry vegan that nobody liked. Everyone stopped inviting me to go to dinner parties and all that stuff. And I think we have to get through that. And then post anger is depression. So we get into a depression phase, which is really like the anger settles and you kind of are just stuck with what is. And you're really just facing, and I think a lot of us are in that phase right now, just not obviously with food, but just like learning about what's happening in our world, learning about what's happening with our environment, our political systems. I think we are in a time of awakening. And part of that awakening is being depressed, is being sad, it's grieving. It's grieving like that time. It's grieving what we thought and how that's different. And I think that's really important to like let yourself feel your feelings and kind of go through that and feel those things so that you can get that out on the other side. We also have bargaining, which is another one where you try to convince yourself, try to get yourself out of that depression. You try to bargain your way out. And this goes for anything, this was also inspired by breakups I've had with men in the past. I was like, it's very
Yeah.
similar. I see these two things, they're hand in hand. And the bargaining is, very important because we're like, well, what if I just have like a little bit here or a little bit there? It's not that bad. What if I'm just on vacation? Or, we start
Right.
we start bargaining with ourselves, trying to make it right. And then the final stage, the best one of all, is acceptance. You've learned, you've screamed, you've cried, you've bargained, and now you're just into acceptance where you're like, okay, I'm ready. I get it. It sucks, but I'm here and I'm ready to like take the next step.
Mhm. Yeah, those are absolutely necessary
Hmm.
too, right? And even if we're talking a little bit about, some acute events like the fires and stuff, it's kind of similar, except
Yeah.
that there's a shock, kind of
Yes.
that first one as a shock. And that and then you get I did a video on this. I'm like, I think like it's necessary to get angry, it's necessary to be sad, it's necessary to be confused, it's
Yeah.
necessary to, it's Bailey, it's like looking at life with radical honesty, and from my perspective, I want to view life fully,
Mm.
and I think that's the greatest opportunity of living. I call it, outside of a brand, I call it super life. I want to live in the greatest mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and I want us to have as much sovereign choice as possible. But when we're not given choice, or that choice is, or the information is so buried that we think we're making a choice, and then, in the dairy industry they're making all of this, oh, it's just these happy cows and all that. It's not true. So
Right.
it's like, that's a lie.
Right.
And so the problem is that there's some truth with lies all over attached to things, like,
Mhm.
and that's where things get really slippery. And I think, going back to the bargaining, I think that's a great point, because have you seen Christspiracy yet?
I haven't. I've like
Oh my God.
I took a break from watching vegan documentaries because I'm a really sensitive person. And so I had to just my this book made my anxiety peak so high with all the
Yeah.
research that I did that I was like,
Yeah.
I need to take a little break from educating myself for a little
Yeah.
bit. But it's on my
The,
list.
the good news is they don't hammer all of those typical things.
Yeah.
they go into some real archaeological facts
Mm,
and understanding about kind of the origins of and the reasons of Christ and the
yeah.
crucifixion and it gets it the point is that I say that because as soon as you said bargaining, one thing that people and leaders in religion will do is that, for example, Christ said, or the Bible says that we have dominion over. And they will use that over and over and over again because they've
Yeah.
then bargained that moral compass. And the truth, and I'll just leave you with this, the origins of the Aramaic and Greek term of dominion is actually not what it's not what we believe dominion to be. It's actually stewardship.
Mm,
So in fact, they through scholars, they found out that it's actually taking care of, not dominion over. It's
mm,
stewardship, and it reorients. It will give you more than challenge you in that sense, from my perspective. But it's that whole thing. We want to bargain with our own morality,
yeah.
you know, and I'm just going to eat this burger pretending that it's just a burger and it wasn't a living animal um, that was put through horrific
Yeah.
um, and how is it not spiritual? How is it
Yeah.
not, you know, yes, are we everything we do, there's a we drive in our car and a bug hits our windshield and dies. Like it's a bummer. And we can't control everything, but the things that we can control,
Right.
those are the things that I think just being a better, greater human
Yeah.
is worth doing.
The Dalai Lama said that I think I'm 99% sure it was him that said this, but said humanity will never actually evolve. It's not going to be technology. It's not going to be all the things that we think. Humanity will never evolve until we actually have empathy at a grand scale. So
Yeah.
until we are empathetic for ourselves, because I think that's step one. I think a lot of times we miss that compassion and that empathy for ourselves, and we don't really think about ourselves in that way. I think a lot of us are like operating at 5%, and then having compassion for your neighbor and empathy for your neighbor, having empathy for people that maybe not agree with you, having empathy for people that have a different skin color than you, that live on the different side of the world than you, and then having empathy for, just like you said, the animals, and how it's our responsibility to care for them, and we have power over them because we have communication and these different lines of these technologies that they don't have. So it's really our responsibility to have empathy for them and to take care of them instead of use and abuse that power. And he said that we'll never evolve as a human race until we can have empathy in our hearts over greed and over all of these other things. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that hits so deep, because I
Mhm.
really do feel like that's something that we're missing.
Yeah. Big time. And I think we've taken that dominion over and just
Mm.
done whatever the hell we wanted to with not acknowledging what we're doing, you know.
Yeah,
It's like I want my house here, I want to build it like this, I want to do that, I want to cut down these trees, I want to, we just do whatever the hell we want. So are we, stewardship for the animals, stewardship for the environment, like it goes on and on and on. What is the best path forward?
right.
And and those things are, it's a constant, but it's like, and also there's stewardship for ourselves, our own health.
Mhm.
Just as we're recording this, I think it was yesterday, the FDA finally put a ban. I think it was red number 3, which
Yeah,
it should be red 40. It should be a bunch of
yeah,
other, dyes, proven, uh, red dye number three was already proven a carcinogen in cosmetics,
Yeah.
and they're still letting it be consumed by children to that point. They've been saying it's the same freaking playbook, right?
Yeah.
It's harmful. It's not great. It's created in a way that's not good for anybody's body,
Yeah,
whether it's
made from
dairy.
petroleum, oil and gas, like they all have a hand. They
Yeah.
all got a hand in it, And I think too, even like glyphosate is such a good example because it's like, okay, they're gonna take the red three out of the same cereal, like Fruit Loops, that's still sprayed with glyphosate. Why is glyphosate?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't make the cereal healthier. It's just, it's to me, it feels like here, we'll give you this, shut up now is really what that feels like.
Totally.
Because the glyphosate, for instance, the second that Bayer bought Monsanto, I was like, oh man, this is going to be even harder to fight. Because when we have the biggest chemical company and the biggest seed company now with one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies, it's going to be so much harder to fight, especially when it comes to like the FDA. Because why is glyphosate approved by the FDA?
Right.
They've paid billions and billions and billions of dollars in settlements for people that have sued them for cancer, and they're still allowed to spray it on all of our food,
Hmm.
which is insane.
Yeah, it's the biggest cartel operating in plain sight in a certain sense,
Yeah.
and that's the you go down the rabbit hole and like forever chemicals almost in everything right now and all of the groundwater. I interviewed a woman that was in the 90s doing some of the first blood tests of PFAS that was in people's blood, and she was
Mm.
gaslit for years and years. And now, since she doesn't work there, she's now able to talk about it, and tell the story of like 3M creating this horrible chemical that they knew, and then they play this game of plausible deniability. But it's all the same. So as you're, I mean, I know the all of this stuff is intense in a certain sense, but
Yeah.
so switching gears to because I love. I'll set you up this way because I love this statement. Um, I have a particular experience in the botanical and food world that's very rare. I got to run around the planet for better part of 15 years finding some of the greatest foods and botanicals in the world, and having my mind blown of how good, how delicious, how powerful, how healing some of the most incredible indigenous plants in countries of origin given to me directly by indigenous people. So when people say to me, "Hey man, I just want to live my life. I want to eat my regular mac and cheese. I want to go get my pizzas. I want to live my life," and I'm sitting there going, "Well, you have no idea on the other side of that, outside of the addiction that you've been co-opted in."
Hmm.
Because it's not even your cravings really at a certain point. It's you've changed your whole internal microbiological system. And so now it's craving more of that.
Hmm.
But I'm celebrate like I don't know about you, but I assume since you're making some of the most beautiful, delicious foods in the world, I like on this other side, there is so much celebratory, unbelievable
Yeah.
food that I'm like, I'm living over here and there's no downside. You know what I mean?
No. When people say, let me just eat my regular mac and cheese, to be totally honest, I think to myself, how boring. Like as a chef, I always wanted to fit in with the boys club. And that meant cooking lots of meat, cooking lots of fat, cooking pork belly on everything, heavy cream on everything, lots of salt. And it never fit. Like it was a puzzle piece for me that just could never quite fit, no matter how many different restaurants I worked in, no matter how many different, you know, Michelin star chefs I would, intern for or whatever. It just never clicked. And I never really felt like I fit in until I challenged myself to no longer cook with animal products. And at that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, there are so many different things that I can use to create familiar consistencies and flavors and, you know, trigger that emotional response. But for instance, for a cashew cream, you can make, or for a sour cream, you can use cashews, you can use tofu, you can use sunflower seeds, you can use hemp seeds, you can use so many different things. There's so many different things that you can use that not only is better for the planet, obviously, but you can also get that plant diversity within your diet and experiment and actually start having fun with food, because it's not this thing that everyone's been doing the same way for hundreds of years. It's really like a brand new way of thinking about cooking, of thinking about macaroni and cheese, for instance. There's a brand new way of thinking about things. Like, for instance, we have a Parmesan cheese in the book that's made out of potatoes. It's so
Wow.
good. The recipe was an accident. I was trying to make feta. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was just, through the whole book, I was just kind of like playing with stuff. And I made this perfect Parmesan that was made out of whole potatoes, because I noticed that a lot of Parmesan recipes had, or vegan Parm recipes were just potato starch. And I was like, I don't want to use the starch. I want to use the whole food. So I used the whole food, and after some trial and error, got this perfect Parmesan that melts, shreds, slices, does all the things you want. Or we have an Asiago cheese that's made out of macadamia nuts. Same thing, shreds, melts, slices, does all the things that you want. And so, or we even have a sproutable butter that's made with cauliflower and carrots. And it has
Wow.
miso paste, so it's got that like fermentation. It's so delicious. It's got that sproutable butter. It browns perfectly on a grilled cheese. It's got all the things that you want, but it's made from vegetables. It's made from plants, and it's so intriguing. And I think if you allow yourself to open up and to be open and to be vulnerable to experiencing something new, you'll realize that like there's so much more fun on this side. And you're right, there
Mhm.
is so much to be celebrated, because it's incredible how these different ingredients and these different plant foods can be changed and manipulated and used to make so many different amazing things. Like oats. Oats are so versatile. Oats get such a bad rap on the internet lately. I don't know what is going on with that. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah.
But buy certified organic oats, A, and B, just like you can do so much with it. You can make oat milk with it. We have sauces and butters and like an oat chocolate sauce. I have like an oat sweetened condensed milk that is a perfect alternative if you want to make cookies or whatever. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. And honestly, this has made me a better chef. This has opened up
Mhm.
my mind in ways that never would have happened if I stayed the course of what I was doing. And it also helped me drop my ego, because
Mhm.
there's so much ego behind cooking with me. I don't know why. It's so weird. When I look at it's like this toxic masculinity. And it's really helped me drop my ego around it. And I don't give a shit what people think about me anymore. When I was, cooking in the old way of doing things, in that, the boys club of chef culture, I cared so much what people thought about me. I cared so much about like my clout and like what my street cred and like rising the social ladder. And I was cooking for professional athletes and executives and all these things. And once I let that go, I just didn't care anymore. I was like, this
Mhm.
isn't even about me. This is about something so much bigger than myself. And I think that alone is such a good lesson for people. Once you realize it's not about you, it's about something so much bigger, and you can have fun and find joy and be more free with what you're eating. It's freeing. When you
Yeah.
go to the grocery store, you see everything for the first time. It's not like you go to your aisle, you go here, you buy your one coffee creamer, you buy the same thing. It's like you're able to look at the store and see things for the first time. And I think that in itself is, life-changing for so many people.
So empowering. And I love the fact that, you're describing the potato parmesan and just like all that stuff. Like what I think is, and all of these descriptions of these different forms of whole foods that you've changed and manipulated to make taste and pleasurable, I think of function, right? So it's
Mhm.
like you're able to get all that plant diversity in
Yeah.
and go down the aisle of functional beverages, functional foods. Everyone's talking about that, but we have it. It's just a matter of bringing in more combinations. We know that longevity is a huge factor when you increase your diversity of exposure of plants. So
Yeah.
And it's such a fun way to kind of do that. So it's like you can kind of nerd out with getting more nutrients in a dip, that is not full of,
Yeah.
weird chemicals that certainly you don't want in your body, and that
Yeah.
has to be shelf stable and all of this. There is so much power in realizing the simplicity of things, in
Oh,
terms of
yeah.
like, I remember I made like oat tortillas. I
Mm.
literally just threw oats in there, put water, made the gradient right, and then just heated a skillet and just made like it's literally in a second. You're having like, so there's it's like it's like giving people the permission
Mhm.
to break out of the cultural convenience of
Yeah.
these horrible foods, because most of them are just ridiculously bad.
Totally.
Um,
And it's this idea too, a lot of people say I can't go dairy free. I live in a rural area. Like not everyone lives in San Diego or LA where there's like I literally have 6 grocery stores in a five minute drive
yeah,
from me. But a lot of people don't have that. And so they think, oh, I can't buy these, cheese alternatives. I can't buy these milk alternatives, or the milk alternatives that are available to me have tons of gums and fillers and preservatives and oil. And so I really wanted this to be the bridge where it's like you literally just need the stuff that you can get in your grocery, like the most simple grocery store, pantry ingredients, whole foods. That's what I want. I want it to be simple, no extreme fermentation required, because I wanted it to be accessible. Because I think that's also something to talk about too, where people don't have access to stuff, and not just the actual food ingredients, but also the education, also the community of, more like-minded individuals. So a lot of times people feel very isolated and that they're just kind of they're stuck and there's nothing that they can do about it.
totally. And again, if you want to live a life that gives you back more, you got to show up for it. You got to take some agency over. And
Yes.
you came into this also with autoimmune stuff, and just you had your own health issues. So
Yeah.
so you were also motivated through those scenarios, because again, we've punted all of this stuff to some chemicalized corporation that
Right.
is then selling us these foods again. It's going to go wrong in our bodies, guaranteed,
Well, that's
right?
exactly what happened to me. So I have endometriosis and I've been in chronic pain from it since I was 11 years old. And it was just like a battle of the chemicals, is what it felt like. You're trading symptoms for side effects. I was on so many pills. I was on birth control at 11 years old. I was having surgery. People offered me hysterectomies when I was in my early 20s. People offered to put me into early
God,
menopause because no
oh my,
Western medicine doctor had an answer for me. No one. I saw hundreds of doctors. I had surgeries. I had horrible medical trauma happen to me. And the thing that's so crazy about this is it takes on average 10 years for a woman to be officially diagnosed with endometriosis. And that is like 10 years of them saying, I'm in excruciating pain, and people not believing them, or just passing over a birth control pill and saying, this is enough. And it literally takes 10 years on average. And then after that, there's no answers. And I think what radicalized me, I mean, you said that word before, and I love that, because what radicalized me is having no options and looking my doctor who performed my last surgery on me like 8 years ago dead in the face and saying, can you tell me that diet has anything to do with endometriosis and chronic period pains? And she said, no, there's absolutely no correlation. You have to be on birth control until you hit menopause. And at that moment, I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tapping out of Western medicine. Like, this has been the worst experience. And that is when I got obsessed with researching about agriculture and nutrition. And I didn't go into this thinking I'm going to be vegan. I'm going to go plant-based. I went into this just with an open mind, with my back against the wall and tons of medical trauma, and being like, I need something else because there is not an answer for me. And what I found is that there are millions of women just like myself, not just with endo, but with PCOS, with thyroid issues, with all sorts of things, eczema, psoriasis, like, arthritis, and not just women, of course, too, so it's just this thing where you realize that 1 in 2 people have a chronic illness, but it's all stemming from the same stuff, you know? Oh
Oh
yeah.
man. I mean, but the motivation when your back is against the wall, and then, it's just so shocking to me, even to this day, and to hear it yet again in your situation where a doctor literally lets that come out of their mouth, where they truly believe
Yeah.
that there is no cause of the issue. It's almost as if this idea that the body's just broken.
No, totally.
The body doesn't know how to deal with it. So yeah, you're missing birth control medication. That's your go-to.
Yep.
So we've got to medicalize you. We've got to cut you and operate on you, and that's the path. And to
Mhm.
say out of your mouth that has no correlation. So when you create an environment for healing, healing happens, period.
Yeah.
And also the opposite happens, right? So
Yeah.
it's just such a beautiful part of the motivation, because again, it's not about you needing to convert people. It's all you came through the healing process to then use your skills and your abilities to put
Yeah.
delicious food together so that
I
people
knew
can,
food.
yeah,
That's what I knew. So I was like,
yeah,
I'm gonna work with what I got, you know. I think that's the most important thing. I was like, I'm just gonna use this thing that I know because I've been, in business for myself as a private chef since I was 19. I've been working in kitchens since I was 11. So this is like
wow,
my thing, you know.
wow.
So this is what I do. It's what I understand. Food makes sense. And food is also the easiest way to connect to somebody. It's the easiest way to break down barriers and to have conversations and to make new friends, and it just felt like the perfect, I was like, I'm just gonna go all in and send it with this horrible thing that I've had to go through. But I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for all the doctors that made me so angry that it kind of, you're right, it gave me so much fuel, to the doctors that tried to put me on antidepressants because I was being so combative in the doctor's office. I'm almost like, you know what? Thank you, because you gave me so much fuel to not only like write cookbooks and do this and have conversations like with you, but also have thousands and thousands of women specifically that come to me with the same exact situation, the same exact scenario. They're going into a pre-op appointment and they're so scared and they feel so alone and they don't know how to advocate for themselves. And a big part of my work is teaching people how to advocate for themselves, because you don't have to be a victim of this system. You can use the doctor as a tool to get to an end. If you like, I'm not saying all Western medicine is bad. Like, there are obviously life-saving things. My best friend's a surgeon, but like, you use it as a tool. You don't have to be trapped in a system if you don't want to be. You can go to the doctor's office and ask them to help you with something. If they're refusing to help you in a way that aligns with your values or who you are or who you want to be, or you just have a bad feeling, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to find something else. And I think, yeah, if there's any women listening to this who feel that way, like, you're not alone. There's millions of women in the US specifically that are stuck in this trap. And yeah, it's crazy.
And largely, yes, it took a while for things to show up and for symptoms to show up and for these
Mhm.
things to start derailing, but it also is simple steps to start unraveling that too.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
to counter the doctor, 100% that has to do with food and
Yeah.
your mental,
So
uh,
much.
yeah, and your point of view about your life and taking your sovereignty back, and you are not a victim. Don't give your power away. All of those things,
Mhm.
and then make some delicious food and share it with your family and share it with your friends and celebrate that. Because
Yeah.
what was the most surprising thing you found out while writing this book?
The most surprising thing I found out while writing this book, I think, gosh, do I go political? Do I go? I'll
Whatever.
say the most surprising thing I found out while writing this book was how many people feel the same way. So, this book started from a series, which we talked about. And while I was writing the book, I was asking lots of questions on my social media, like trying to get everyone involved. And I'm realizing, well, as I'm writing it, that everyone, I mean, obviously not everybody, but so many people in my community were in the same boat that I once was in. I don't feel good. I know I need to stop eating dairy. My husband won't stop. I don't know what to do. My kid has colic and I need to stop eating dairy for my kid. There's like so many things. My dad just got diagnosed with heart disease, which my dad literally did last year. He finally gave up dairy. I'm like, oh, thank God, Dad. I've been telling you
Wow.
for all these years, like so many of us think that we're isolated in these horrible, traumatic things that we're going through. And in reality, when I'm writing this cookbook, I'm realizing, and it gives me fuel to keep writing it. Because sometimes when you're writing a book, you've been there, you think, is anyone going to read this? Is anyone going to care about this? Is this even, is this so far into the wellness pipeline that no one's going to care? And I think when I started asking questions and posting recipes and just telling my story, the amount of people that started coming back was really overwhelming. The amount of stories kind of led to my anger a little bit too. I was just so upset for all these people going through these things. But at the end of the day, it all came down to the same thing where people wanted to change, but they didn't know how and they didn't have the resources. And they just needed that little push, that little step of whether it's education or recipes or even knowing what to put in your kitchen to make the recipes, or how to grocery shop, what to look for on nutrition labels. Like every single person had just one thing missing to make that step. And that was the most surprising thing, was how many people, like, we're all the same. We're all so much more connected and we're all so much more similar than we realize.
Yeah, and then you transmute all of the pain and suffering you went through, and you put it to your skills and
Yeah.
integrate it into your life, and create more than a cookbook. I mean, certainly, obviously, it's just a lot more than a cookbook. The food becomes the muse of an opportunity to change a
Yeah.
life based on the situation that we're in.
Yeah.
It's a weird situation that we're in. It's a weird. It started before us, of these corporations kind of co-opting all of this stuff and engineering our food,
Yeah.
and it takes a level of consciousness and awareness, and hopefully you can save some more people from too much pain and suffering on that path.
That's the
Um,
goal.
yeah, that's the goal. I'm proud of you for doing it, and it's a good. I think as a fellow, book writer and other things, we just want to pass on stuff that can
Yeah.
help people, and I think that's part of the connective tissue of the best parts of humanity. And
I think so too.
yeah.
We're all put here to help each other. That is our greatest purpose and our greatest gift, is if we can all help each other. And I think we're both seeing so much of that with the fires in LA, of just how much the community has come together and how much our differences don't even matter in times like this. And, I'm seeing it even with the potential TikTok ban. I'm seeing it online. I really do feel like we're all starting to wake up and realize that there's so much power in numbers. We can use late stage capitalism to our benefit. We can stop giving these people money. We can stop just laying down and taking it, so to speak, and just really rise together. And we may not all agree on the same thing, but I think most of us, think that factory farming is horrible and we don't want to support it. And I think most of us agree that there shouldn't be chemicals in our food. And most of us think that, groceries should be affordable and that we should be able to buy healthy food and we shouldn't have to pay extra just to not have chemicals on our food. So
Thank you for all you're doing, and I can't
thanks.
wait to dig into some of these recipes and celebrate with you that 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 food can be really good and good for us, and
Yeah.
start to break the chains of this fatal conveniences of weird capitalistic corporate dangerous food
Hmm.
that is
Yeah.
that is all around us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can have what we want and what we need. We really
What
can.
one more question. What
Yeah.
for you, what does a super life mean to you?
Hmm. I think a super life to me, is having my health and being extremely present and having gratitude for every single day, gratitude for my husband, my family, just being, the older I get, the more heavily aware I am of how fleeting everything is. And with everything that's going on too, you realize how everything's so impermanent. So super life to me is just being healthy and present and loved. That's all we can really ask for.
That's a good one. That's perfect. Well, thank you so much for all your work and the book. Where can people find it? All places, books, and
Everywhere books are sold. Yeah, it's also going to be available in Europe and Australia.
all right.
So yeah, we got a worldwide book situation happening here. And I'm also going on book tour too, with William Sonoma, which is very exciting because I don't know if William Sonoma has ever picked up a book quite like this before. So
Mm,
we'll be in New York City, Chicago, Austin, Nashville, Boulder, San Francisco, and San Diego.
right on. Well, good for them for stepping in.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So
That's
fun.
awesome. Well,
Yeah.
congrats on the book. I know it's you're tackling some stuff, and you have recipes that
Yeah.
are celebrating food. But I'm proud of you for doing it. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Darin. Appreciate it.
You betcha.